Welcome to The Journey, an online commentary on today's scripture reading with Seth Davidson.
Today's reading is Mark chapter 14, verses 53 through 65. They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave this false testimony against him. We heard him say, "I will destroy this man-made temple, and in 3 days will build another not made by man." Yet even then their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, "Are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you?" But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again the high priest asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" "I am," said Jesus, "and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." The high priest tore his clothes. "Why do we need any more witnesses?" he asked. "We have all heard the blasphemy. What do you think?" They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, "Prophesy." And the guards took him and beat him. Well, in the 1960s, a famous case involving a suspect named Ernesto Miranda made it all the way to the Supreme Court. It was Miranda versus the state of Arizona, and a woman accused this man of abduction and driving into the desert and rape, a very serious crime. But when he was interrogated, the cops got a confession at the time, but as it was being tried, the testimony didn't agree. Ernesto Miranda wound up recanting that, and the defense attorney didn't even find witnesses. There was all this disagreeing testimony. But nevertheless, Miranda was convicted, and then it was appealed. And in 1966, the Supreme Court heard the case. Eventually, Miranda was killed in prison, but it has resulted in what's called the Miranda Rights. Because the reason it made it all the way to the Supreme Court is Miranda didn't know that he had the right to remain silent. And so nowadays it's standard procedure. And if we've seen crime scene shows, we know exactly what the Miranda Rights are, even if we didn't know the name. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. And it goes on and on. You have the right to an attorney, all of these things. Well, I bring it up because a few thousand years ago, Jesus had the wherewithal to know that he had the right to remain silent. And so we've seen throughout the book of Mark, he repeatedly says, "Don't tell who I am." He says it to the disciples. He says it to the ones whom he heals. Hey, don't say who I am. Which is counterintuitive to us. Oftentimes, if we read, we think, well, Jesus was bringing about a revolution, and we often attach name recognition and branding and the social media age. But Jesus was always like, don't tell anyone what I've done. Don't tell anyone who I am. So Jesus knew of the importance, because when the religious leaders would know without a doubt who he claimed to be, he knew that would be the beginning of the end. And so for most of this trumped up legal proceeding in the Sanhedrin, Jesus remained silent. The Sanhedrin was the collective leadership under Israel, the spiritual leadership. It was under control of the high priest and his cronies. These were ones who were kind of in cahoots with Rome. They were the elite. They didn't have much room for obedience, and the Pharisees and these high priests didn't get along very well, but they were forced to meet in the Sanhedrin. And at this point, they're all on the same side, bringing trumped up accusations against Jesus. And we can just imagine the scene. In that day, particularly in this context, there's not due process. This isn't a legal proceeding. They're going to find him guilty one way or the other. And so they're bringing up this accusation and that accusation. And none of the accusations agree. Why don't they agree? Well, first, Jesus is innocent. Second, he's a lot smarter than any of them are. And so I can just imagine Jesus sitting back as all these testimonies don't agree. If there were any due process or justice, he'd be acquitted here and now. He's almost acquitted, by the way, by Pontius Pilate, this brutal Roman dictator who hears the charges and essentially says this man's innocent, but he has his own problems, and we'll see that here in a few days. But these trumped up charges, they don't agree. Jesus is innocent. He should be acquitted. And the whole time he's standing there, silent. So it begs the question, why did Jesus respond in the way that he did when he did? In no uncertain terms, when he's asked the direct question that could actually get him convicted, tried, and killed. Are you the one? Are you the Messiah? The chosen one of God? This isn't just asking who he thinks he is. This is asking the burning question that results in a verdict for them of blasphemy. And Jesus knows that this is where it's heading. Because if someone were to claim to be the Messiah, that may not be enough to get them convicted. The Messiah was likely going to be a revolutionary, so they thought, to overthrow Rome. That would get them in trouble with Rome, but not with the Israel's religious elite. But when someone claimed to be the Christ, the Son of God, that's a different story, because to claim sonship was to claim that intimate connection. It was to claim the divinity of which only God himself was supposed to have. And it was that and only that that could give the religious leaders who are in the Sanhedrin the ability to try and convict Jesus. And so they ask, are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God? And Jesus, in no uncertain terms, answers this question. He says, I am. Not only is he claiming that, yes, I am the one, but he's hearkening back to the Old Testament where God himself is the great I am. He says, I am. And he says, and you will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds at the right hand of the Mighty One. And so not only is he the Son of God, not only is he claiming divinity, but he's claiming to be the right-hand one of God himself. And this is blasphemy. It doesn't matter for them that their testimony doesn't agree. They have heard Jesus, and they all, in the moment, convict him and will send him eventually to be tortured and to the cross. Well, Jesus had remained silent throughout. Why does he choose now to break his silence? And it's simply this. Jesus knows who he is, and he knows what he must do. He knows who he is, and that gives him confidence, even knowing that all hell is literally about to break loose. And he knows what he's called to do. And so he could remain silent and live for a few more days or weeks or maybe even years. But he knows that now is the time. He knows what he has to do, and it's only now that he'll break his silence to go to the cross on behalf of you and I. So this should give us appreciation for Jesus and who he is, and appreciation for what he's done. But it should also give us conviction that we can be men and women who do the right thing even if chaos erupts around us. And it also should give us passion and conviction that there's wisdom sometimes in remaining silent, but that also it can take courage to speak up even when you know your words that are right won't be received well. If we've ever experienced hardship because of those things, well, Jesus has more. and He's with us. And so we may have the right to remain silent, but there are times where we should use our voice and use the authority given by Christ to go and take new ground, to have the hard conversation, and to trust God with the results. Hopefully this is an encouragement to you and a challenge.